Project Baltimore is brought to you by the Snyder Law Group.
Tonight, the U.S. Department of Education doesn't appear to be doing its homework before awarding millions of your tax dollars in charter school grants.
One of those schools right here in Baltimore is now being shut down. Project Baltimore's Chris Pabst explains how that school was getting money from the federal government, even as its owner was in trouble with the federal government.
This is hard to believe, but a simple public records search could have told the U.S. Department of Education all it needed to know, as it was awarding more than $1.5 million of your tax dollars to a school that is now closing. But apparently, the feds didn't do it. What did you think when you saw those stories?
Finally.
We agreed to conceal this man's identity to protect his job. He's one of several teachers from city schools who recently contacted Project Baltimore. All of them taught at Northwood-Uphold Community Academy in Northeast Baltimore.
When I saw your second story, I then realized, well, I now definitely need to speak up, and I need to speak up for myself.
Speak up about what he saw while working at NACA.
Yeah, when I saw your report, it all made sense.
NACA gets the same funding as any other charter in the city, but this teacher says the school always seemed to have money problems. Project Baltimore hears often about a lack of basic resources in city schools. But at NACA, this teacher says it was on another level.
We questioned why we were being limited in resources, why we weren't able to make copies, why we didn't have a curriculum, why there weren't any textbooks. I didn't have a bulletin board in my classroom, a dry erase board, a Promethean, nothing. We taught on paper and pencil. Paper was a huge issue. We didn't understand why we were being limited to paper. I mean, we were teachers that were teaching as if we were teaching in a third world country. You know, essentially. Like, we had no resources, just us and students. When we started to see the little things like that kind of disappear is when we started to question where the money was going.
So when Project Baltimore told this teacher about our latest discovery in our investigation of NACA, he wasn't surprised.
I saw it. I know it. I mean, we all saw it.
A prestigious grant from the federal government worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
2017 was a good year for NACA and its founder, Dr. Cecil Gray. His school won a $1.5 million expansion grant from the U.S. Department of Education. But just 15 months later,
all in favor?
North Avenue voted to shut NACA down.
Motion passes 8-1.
In part for not complying with federal education law. How closely do you really think the Department of Education is looking at these applications? Max Eden with the Manhattan Institute.
Not closely enough to double check.
Project Baltimore combed through NACA's grant application, finding plenty of factual errors. We exposed how the U.S. Department of Education does not contact local school systems or the state to ask questions before issuing hundreds of millions of dollars in grants. The federal government also doesn't appear to check with the federal government before issuing grants. Take a look at this. In September of 2018, the IRS placed a $44,000 tax lien on Northwood-Uphold Methodist Church. Why is this important? Well, Dr. Gray is the pastor of that church. His school, NACA, sits on the church's property. So at the exact time the federal government awarded his school a $1.5 million grant, Gray hadn't paid his federal taxes at his church for 3 years. The Department of Education declined our request for interviews, but told us in a statement, as a result of this investigation, the federal government is working internally to improve how grant applications are reviewed and scored.
Dr. Gray? Hi, I'm Chris Pabst with Fox 45.
As for Dr. Gray, he hasn't returned any of our calls or emails. When we tracked him down, he wouldn't answer our questions. When we reached out to him for this story, we got no response.
Dr. Gray, can you answer just a few of our questions? We've been trying to get a hold of you.
It's almost confusing because you want to speak out. You want to say something about it because we see it every day.
For teachers, speaking out can be a risk.
You know, they can do things that, you know, make your life hard as a teacher.
But this educator says he came forward before more money, federal or local, is awarded to his former school.
It was only a matter of time before people would start catching on to him.
Now, the Department of Education told us that so far they've paid out about $500,000 of that $1.5 million grant to NACA. They also said the grant could be revoked, and Dr. Gray could be asked to pay back the money he has already received. And we want to hear from you. Do you have a follow the money story that you want us to investigate? Call our hotline, send me an email, go to foxbaltimore.com to follow our progress. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.